empowerment, water resources. What is your take as NPA regarding the empowerment of communities and building capacity?
Empowerment. One, we need to democratize knowledge access. They should have access to sustainable water and environmental management, to add value to water and environmental resources. Financial investment, policy investment, technical investment in water and environmental resources, to see that they contribute effectively to improving the quality of life of our people. And they should see that their income, their survival, their employment are all hinged on a sustainable water and resource base. Without seeing this, they are not able. In terms of institutional strengthening, we need to interrogate our institutions, create workable solutions, create workable institutions, and also give adequate budgets to water and environmental underfunded in our budget. They are looked at as given with very minimal intervention from the highest level of policy and decision making. But also mainstream them in the development process. We need institutionalization of water and environment water in different ministries. Mainstreaming the policy, in the planning, in the budget. That way we shall be strengthening the system and empowering this and bring water and environment decision making. In terms of capacity, we need to educate our people. We need to raise awareness of our people. And this raising should not stop at the community level, but also at the highest level of government. People that can make key decisions do not know that there is something called environment and water security. Hardware, but there's this security which underpins all those other securities. Chair, we need to raise awareness on all of this. I thank you.
Since 2002, Mr. Owach, I don't know if you are hearing me.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
You are welcome, sir. Good morning. I have just a question which I want to set the ball rolling. UN, as far as its agency, is involved in many programs in Uganda and world over. Aimed at ensuring that there is water and environment security for socio-economic development wherever they are participating. In your opinion, how does water security impact on the political, social, and economic stability of a given country? And let's talk to Uganda. And I from your word, your name, I think you should be a person from around this Great Lakes region. You're welcome, sir.
Refers to the capacity of population to safeguard on sustainable access to adequate quantities of water, acceptable quality. Uganda. Water security has lots of benefits, including its role in ensuring peace or contributing to peace and political stability, in terms of reducing the negative effects of conflicts, of course, conflicts regarding water infrastructure related to governance or social political systems, and so on. It brings the stability. But Chair, I want to move on quickly to a very crucial benefit, the economic benefit and development benefit in terms of contribution to food, contribution to energy provision, contribution in terms of transportation at times, industry, which my colleagues have already alluded to some. But in terms of economics, food security, for example, we see that water is required by crops, for its production growth, required for livestock, fresh drinking, and also for pasture development. Is required for fish. We have captured fisheries and aquaculture, and a lot others in addition to water being required in industry and in transport, in tourism, and things like that. For drinking water for human beings, I think that has already been alluded to. Also, the benefits of ecosystem services which are provided, like the forest, which provides us, absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and things like that. We also have to be aware that what relating to, for example, shared water resources, like for the case of Uganda, we share the river Nile waters, and so on. So in terms of bringing reduce
Have we lost the chair? Mr.
The chair is here. We have lost but as Uganda and you who is our partner, how can the country and the partners, can we be able to cooperate, coordinate, given the fact that Uganda gets most of its, as far as the economy is concerned, we get most of our services and products from the environment, water, and natural resources. How can we coordinate to ensure that our economy thrives?
for that. In terms of ensuring coordination for sustainable infrastructure development for a country like Uganda, which relies a lot on water, environmental, natural resources for its economy. First of all, I would wish to say that sustainable infrastructure involves developing a variety of infrastructure like the roads, the buildings, energy, water infrastructure, of course, for economic, social, and environmental development. We know that from the definition from the International Institute of Sustainable Development, it defines infrastructure as, in this case, lowering carbon and environmental footprints, protecting the natural ecosystems, providing optimal use of natural ecosystems and their infrastructure services. It moves beyond compliance with core labor standards and human rights. It also triggers technological and industrial innovation. It increases investment in related sectors, including like in education, research, and so on. It increases employment. It increases foreign direct investments, and it brings value for money to taxpayers and also to investors. So sustainable infrastructure should therefore drive sustainable development, as I said before, through ensuring that the roads infrastructure is there, the ports, plants, and a wide variety, including schools, hospitals, and so on. And for example, there are certain types in terms of transportation, certain types of transportation infrastructure projects, such as developing, for example, electronic buses, and so on, has health benefits, and so on, in terms of reducing the carbon emissions and improving the air quality and things like that. So we therefore know that ultimately, when governments who serve as the custodians of these public assets and services tender for sustainable solutions, they also send important market signals that there is a long-term and growing demand for the green building materials, for example, sustainable design and technologies. And for the UN, currently, as you are aware, the focus is so much on the sustainable development goals, of which countries are also signed to, including Uganda. And in that case, therefore, we think that infrastructure development would really be crucial. And we know that governments, for example, including Uganda, currently spend quite some significant in sustainable development goals, either directly or indirectly. I think, in conclusion, I think in terms of infrastructure required to improve food security, social cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charles Sakagwa. Is water and environment security achievable or a myth? You are Ugandan, you've studied here, you've studied in London, and you've worked for the government, you've done research, now you are part of an international organization. Is this achievable? We'll come back to you. Now I want to move to Mr. David Duri, Country Director, Worldwide Fund for Nature. David, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
David.
Thank you for moderator. My name is David Dooley. I work with WWF, as you said. We're a conservation organization with a mission to stop the degradation of the Earth planet and work in harmony with nature. Basically, governance issue is quite critical in terms of what we are seeing in the trend of natural resources, degradation, and water resources as well. The trend that my colleagues have said, the declining trend in forestry, in wetlands, in water, in biodiversity, are basically pointers that governance would be the underlying cause. Now, one of the things that is quite critical for us is that when you look at water and natural resources and environment, fundamentally these are this is the natural capital on which our development is based on, political, social development is based on, and livelihoods of the communities. But in a different sector, for example, the health, the wildlife and tourism, the fisheries, the hydropower, the food production, the transport, and these are all listed in different sectors and ministries. So one of the governance issues that we see as we work on the ground is that the institutional coordination of these different sectors is really far from real. We have situations where the Ministry of Water, Ministry of Mineral Development and Energy allocates concession for mining in protected areas, in forest reserves. And that is really a clear sign that there is lack of coordination and understanding of the values of the impact of the economic development as far as extractive is concerned with water and environment. Not many years ago, we had a promotion of oil palms growing in the Kalangala Highlands, promoted by the Ministry of Agriculture. And this resulted into mass deforestation of the islands. And the impacts are there. Now the palm oil is there, but we are seeing the impact of pollution of Lake Victoria, the declining water quality, and the impact on hydropower generation is also there. So the institutional coordination is a clear governance challenge that is there. Pollution, the policies that are even in place are implemented and compliance is ensured. Just recently, we had, after 10 years of having a ban on plastics, just been reinvigorated and by the Ministry of Water and Environment with the support of the Speaker of Parliament, and we have made it really seen it come and pass. So this is another critical issue. Climate change challenges is critical for us. Yesterday, of course, we heard that we have is on the table and is being discussed, but we have to understand that this is a cross-cutting issue that affects a number of institutions, a number of ministries, a number of sectors in climate change relation, which is growing and is at 70% and above, and the accelerating degradation, no jobs for this youth. And this relates down to how they also undermining the catchment values by degrading the catchments, because they have to burn charcoal, they have to engage in a number of activities that is dependent on natural resources. It's to promoting and developing youth without undermining the water and environment security and natural resources. Inadequate knowledge, information, this is really critical. We've been talking about water abstractions, but sometimes these abstractions are being done without necessarily having the permits and even monitoring these permits. And also our data sets, we should be having data that we have very few years of collection, and this data is also not easily available. So in modeling and processing and making decisions is a challenge. We talked about budgets yesterday and location of budgets, this sector in terms of the security for water, environment, and natural resources. Now, we live in a country where politics sometimes is not separated from environmental issues. We are now in the 80s. I was one of the people who was involved in eviction and securing the Mabiro forest. But before I even retired, there was also another policy to put on, to allow an industry to set up sugar plantation in Mabira. And there was really an uproar on that. That really points to the issue of politics. For example, we also have our wetlands being degraded. A case in point is just the wetlands in Kakoge, as you move northwards in the Bulu Road. Now, this wetland, a lot of noise was made about it about 3, 4, 5 years ago. But after that, there was a big poster and banner which was put, inviting the president to launch the project. And the project has continued. And so this really tells you so much about, lack of that political support, and it's a governance issue that we really need that we face. The staffing and capacity at various levels. Enormous responsibility is there to manage the environment, both at national and local level. But if you look at the understaffing level and the underfunding level at both local governments, it's really a challenge. Now, there's definitely a disconnect between the different, institutions. I mentioned this, but when you look at the ground, for example, we have the Water Users Association, and there is a disconnect between them talking to, for example, the local environment committees, the community wildlife committees. All these committees are there, but find they're not really talking together, and that relates to a governance issue. Now, what is my organization doing? For many years, we have been working with the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. We are one of the first organizations to pioneer catchment management. We started it from the eastern catchment of Lake Albert, in which we did the catchment management plans for River Waki, Wambabia, and Mpusti. And we also worked with the ministry to develop a manual for integrated water resources management, which was taken up by the ministry and improved on, and is a manual that is now being used. We continue to pursue low carbon pathways through increasing access to renewable energy, reduce biomass consumption through effective and efficient utilization of biomass for cooking and institutional work. Also contributing to NDC-related energy, water, forest, and wildlife practices. We are promoting a nature-based solution initiative in which, in the center, we are looking at forest landscape restoration, building resilience and adaptation of the ecosystems and communities, and promoting non-consumptive use of nature, e.g. tourism, in protected areas. We have been working with the private sector to enhance water resources stewardship by communities in Wizi River. The Nile Breweries is supporting one of the passenger hydropower companies in Mubuko, Nyamamba, Lamea, Nyamugasani, Wini, and Lubiri rivers in the Rwenzori landscape. We continue to design bankable proposals or projects looking at profitable investment in water that have positive impacts on people and nature. And in this, we are focusing in the Greater Virunga landscape, and in particular, we've been working in Wizi and Buku area. Protection of important water sources for municipal, irrigation, industrial, and hydropower system. We have done this in Nyao, in West Nile, Mubuku, and with the Wizi. And we continue to advocate, and in one of the big advocates we made, we were able to upgrade the Rwenzori Mountain National Park to a Ramsar site, which was rated an altitude of 4,000 meters above sea level, one of the highest Ramsar sites in the world. At national level, we continue to support the development of policies. We have worked on the base manual with the NEMA, payment for existing services. We continue to work on the natural resources management bills, the National Environment Act, which was passed, the Wildlife Act, which was also passed, and water bills. All these we work with our civil society, which are sort of engaged in the different sector of policy research, as well as accountability and service delivery, and provide our input into the policy vision and arena. At the regional level, what I mean here by regional level, we continue to support civil society organizations. 40% of our budget actually goes into supporting civil society in developing catchment management, working with energy sector in the different parts of the focal area that we have, that is the Albert and Rift. I think I can pause on there and wait for other questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. You've talked about governance, about budgets. Do we have any solutions, sound solution and management of these resources to prevent conflicts between societies, people to people? Do we have laws? Have you worked on laws, and have you come in handy in this country, being a Ugandan?
As we say, is really broad. One of the things that we are really continuing to support so much and encourage is accountability and transparency with the stakeholders that we work with. You remember, not many years ago, we had very serious governance in the sector, for example, in the forest, where even the executive director had jail time and many others, and that really hindered the image and of the sector and the institutions, with corruption, basically. So we continue to harmonize some of these disparity differences in views with respect to governance. We have worked out civil society groups, for example, oil and gas, that they come together as a group and they advocate on issues that are eventually taken up government consideration. So we continue to do this. We also develop capacity, we work on capacity issues in which some of these governance challenges are handled. For example, the manual that is now being used to train different levels of actors in environment and natural resources and water governance, water management. Now, the issue of budgets is really quite challenging. We discussed this about, and in that meetings we really look out of our experience of facing the difficulties of implementing policies, implementing actual government policies, and working with communities and working with the local government in the constraint of the budget. So we bring this forward for consideration, but I think we also look at our supporters externally and use our network to really bring this to the attention of government. I think we really we organize meetings with the parliamentary groups and make presentations of these issues to these groups. So what I can say here is that it's really a struggle. It's a big struggle because the prioritization of budgets, allocation, and the ceiling that is set by the Ministry of Finance seem to be quite skewed towards really undermining the investment in the environment. We continue to work with private sector investors. I can just say that just last month, WWF signed a contract with the private sector investor in building and of $4 million that is coming into this country to do forest landscape restoration in a bid to neutralize their carbon footprint in the operations that they do. This is a global initiative, but Uganda is taking a big share of it, $4 million, and we'll continue to engage in this. So we have some supplementary budgets that really come from our investment. I already mentioned that we make direct contribution in our budgetary allocation to support communities in terms of in the gaps that they feel that exist in there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'll come back to you. Is this security possible? Is it achievable or a myth? Later on. We've received the comment from Trinomaso Wilfred. Is also still continuing to discuss issues to do with the budget, that it's too small. I want now to turn to Jane. The constraint of resources, financial. How can we tackle this? As still here, we need to discuss this. I see also Jacinta, you are welcome. That we should have invited politicians. I think the politicians were there yesterday, they will be here tomorrow. We have papers, some policy papers starting this afternoon in session number 3, one of the parallel sessions. Jane, this issue of finance.
Thank you very much. What we have, do we have enough evidence? Are we generating enough evidence to warrant more funding. It's one thing to say water and environment are key, they're important, and sometimes it becomes an assumption. It's like everybody should know, and yet not everybody actually knows. And we heard yesterday from Honorable Kefa that it's not as simple as it sounds. So have we generated enough evidence to justify that? I think 2 or 3 years ago, the Ministry of Water and Environment conducted an extensive study on the economic implications of water and environment towards economic growth of the country. But I don't think we actually used the findings very well to put up a case for more funding, especially a case for more public funding or public financing. And I think we should have extracted that. Some 5 years or so back, the World Bank also did the same in Uganda. The economic implications of sanitation and hygiene, and what we were losing as a result of not paying attention to that. I think, yeah, we may have some of the findings, we may have done some good research around that, but getting into the next level of advocating for change, using that evidence to advocate for increased public financing, for increased alternative financing, I think it's something we haven't done very well, even if we have that kind of evidence. Secondly, Chair, we need to look at what yesterday both the keynote speaker, Dr. Muhumuza, and the Honorable Member, Honorable Kefa Chwanuka said. Identifying allies in proper places, allies in places that can really make a change. Who is the president listening to, for example? Who are those groups of institutions or individuals that can actually enable us to put up a case for more funding for the sector, for water and environment, for water, sanitation and hygiene? And that's really getting into advocacy. Does government know, or is government even interested in doing active advocacy targeting government? Because it's one thing to have the Ministry of Water and Environment presenting their plans and budgets to Honorable Kefa Chwanuka's committee, and then just sitting back and relaxing. Remember the question yesterday of unfunded priorities. How can you have unfunded priorities? If it is a priority, it should be funded. So it shouldn't be unfunded. So I think government really looking at advocacy, not as for non-state actors, but government being able to do its own advocacy, targeting government and the people and institutions that really matter, and convincing them using evidence generated by government or generated by non-state actors to bring water and environment into the inner, the yolk. If you remember the diagram that Dr. Muhumuza presented, inside, not outside, in the dark place of the yolk, not the light yellow place, the sector, and you're not even using fully funds that are already provided, funds going back to the, then there are many questions on your capacity to consume. But of course we know the reasons. We have long procurement processes, we have long accountability processes, sometimes accountability has questions. So those are things that we need to address. And the next one, Chair, is to look at regulation. It's something that has cut across from all the different presenters. How are we addressing regulation? Regulation that tackles accountability, regulations that tackles enforcement. Yesterday the NPA Chair did quite a lot of reference to enforcement. You cannot say, oh, give us more, when you don't have in place good regulatory systems that talk about governance, that ensure that there is good wash governance. And so those are some of the gaps that we need to plug in and address. And they are doable. I think they are. We can address them, but we need to address them pronto, as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As rightly put, our consumption capacity in some of the sectors is still low. we need to build human capacity probably. I want to call in Ronald Kagwa. Ronald, the one who gave us the keynote. Ronald, are you there? Whether as NPA, you have a say in annual budgets. You have priorities, yes. You have targets. You have indicators. And do you have also a stick if the sector is off the track? Do you have that power to caution and bring to the power B whether we are on track?
Thank you, Chair. I want to say that the budgeting is done with the participation of many stakeholders. And NPA is one of the key stakeholders that participates in budgeting. We do contribute to the budget strategies and also identify budget priorities. For example, for the budget 2021-22, we have identified priorities. The priorities have been discussed in the Ministry of Finance. So NPA does participate in setting national priorities, and it's a key partner in the budgeting process. Now, we have what you call a certificate of compliance assessment, whereby we assess whether a sector budget, MDA budget, is aligned to the interventions identified in our development plans. In other words,